The bell above the diner door jingled faintly, but no one looked up. It was late afternoon in Tallwood. Mississippi sunlight spilled through faded blinds and bounced off ketchup bottles, sticky menus, and time-worn linoleum. The scent of grease and overbrewed coffee clung to every surface. At a corner booth, laughter echoed from a group of white men. A conversation loud, casual, and dismissive. Aria stepped inside quietly, her shoes worn thin, soles flapping slightly as she walked. Her dress faded blue with frayed edge, shung awkwardly on her thin frame. The room didn't go silent. No heads turned. To them, she was invisible. She clutched something small in her palm, fingers curled tightly around it. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on the woman in the wheelchair, slumped slightly beside a silver-haired man in a collared shirt and worn jeans. Mr. Langford, local business owner, known, respected, untouched by doubt. Aria approached slowly. The men barely noticed until her shadow stretched across the table. "Can I help you?" One of them asked flatly, irritation coloring his tone. She didn't flinch. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Your mother, she's hurting." Aria looked directly at Mr. Langford. "If you help me heal, I can help her walk again." The men blinked, then burst out laughing. Big, stomping, chest-heaving laughter. One of them slapped the table. Another shook his head and muttered, "Lord, this town brings him out." Mr. Langford leaned back, chuckling with the others, disbelief written all over his face. Aria opened her palm. In it rested a small, polished stone, smooth, dark, and glinting with a faint shimmer beneath the diner's harsh ceiling lights. "This stone," she said softly, "was given to me by my grandma. It shines for those who listen. It shines brighter when someone is ready to be healed." "Girl, are you out of your mind?" The waitress snapped from behind the counter. "Go on now, before I call someone." Mr. Langford reached across the table and flicked the stone from her hand. It clattered to the floor and rolled beneath a booth. His mother remained silent, her face turned slightly, lips parted. Aria's eyes didn't waver. "It's not me you have to believe," she said, almost to herself. The room quieted for just a second. Mr. Langford's mother shifted suddenly in her chair. Her eyes darted downward. A sharp breath escaped her lips. I felt something," she whispered. The laughter stopped. Mr. Langford stared at her, confused. Mama Aria turned and walked out the diner's door without another word, leaving. Behind silence, a forgotten stone, a crack in the certainty of those who'd never believed she could matter. She had heard laughter like this before. The kind that wasn't just amusement, but a blade honed by power, dulled only by cruelty. Aria stood motionless as the men laughed again, louder now, as if trying to drown out their discomfort. The waitress jabbed a finger toward the door. "Go on, girl. Don't come back stirring up foolishness." But Aria's eyes didn't blink. The stone, her grandmother's stone, lay near the booth's edge, reflecting a strange shimmer under the flickering diner light. The sound of ridicule faded in her ears, replaced by the memory of another room-stained linoleum, but colder. A hospital waiting area years ago. Aria sat beside her mother, who clutched her stomach, pale and sweating. Hours passed. The nurse called them liars when they said the pain was real. "You people always looking for drugs," she muttered. They had waited anyway, till it was too late. Aria never forgot the cold of that chair, the silence when the machine stopped. Unstable, that's what they called her in court. After she smashed a glass in a foster home for being told her mother should have taken better care of herself. The social worker didn't ask why she'd screamed. No one did. They didn't see rage. They saw threat. She learned to stay quiet, but she never forgot. Back in the diner, a chair scraped. One of the men still chuckled. Mr. Langford leaned down, grabbed the stone, and with a cruel smirk tossed it across the floor. It rolled slow and deliberate before stopping near the kitchen. Doorway, Aria didn't flinch. Then it happened. Langford's mother, silent until now, drew in a sudden sharp breath. Her hands twitched in her lap. She looked down, eyes wide. "My feet," she whispered, almost too quiet to hear. I can feel my toes." The waitress froze mid-step. One of the men stopped chewing. Langford stared at his mother, confused. "What did you say, Mama?" "I can feel them. her voice cracked. I haven't, in years. Aria turned slowly. Her expression didn't change. She said nothing, only met the older woman's gaze. The moment hung like smoke and natural. It's hovering, fragile. She's messing with your head, one of the men barked, trying to recapture the old rhythm. Coincidence? Langford didn't answer. His eyes had narrowed not in belief, but in fear. The kind that blooms when a world you trust begins to tilt. Aria stepped toward the stone, bent down, and picked it up. For a heartbeat, she stood in the center of the diner, unwanted silhouette among cracked booths and closed minds. Then she turned and left. This time, no one stopped her. The morning after the diner incident, Tallwood buzzed with a kind of electricity it hadn't felt in years. Church ladies whispered during service. Teenagers filmed TikToks outside the diner, pointing to the exact spot where the stone had rolled. And by noon, a headline blinked across regional news. Girl claims magic stone. Healed woman in wheelchair, real miracle or dangerous hoax? By sundown, quiet southern town was no longer quiet. Aria sat in a stiff plastic chair at the local youth intake center, fingers curled tight around the stone in her pocket. Her eyes were swollen, not from fear, but from disbelief that the world always seemed to punish her most when she told the truth. Earlier that day, 2 officers had shown up at her temporary group home. They said there had been concerns of manipulation, possibly coercion. She'd barely said a word before they placed her in the back seat and drove her away. It's not even a phone call. Meanwhile, the diner's surveillance footage made its way. Online, grainy, but clear enough to stir up chaos. Some claimed it was a trick of the camera. Others swore you could see light flash from the stone just before the old woman gasped. But Mr. Langford told a different story. It was just nerves, he said to Channel 12 News. She's had episodes like that before. Girl caught us off guard is all. No miracle. It's just coincidence. The camera caught his hesitation. The subtle twitch in his jaw when asked if his mother had really walked later that evening. But his word, in Tallwood, carried more weight than hers ever could. Inside the interrogation room, Aria remained silent as a heavy-set officer paced. Tell us who put you up to this, he demanded. You working with someone? Trying to scam people? She didn't answer. That's when Detective Claire Monroe stepped in. Late 30s, calm, black, braided hair, pulled back in a professional bun. She'd been listening from behind the glass. Something about the girl's stillness, her eerie quiet, didn't read like a liar. I'll take it from here, Claire said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The officer scoffed. She hasn't said a damn thing. Maybe because no one's bothered to ask, like she's a person.
Ow.
Claire sat down across from Aria. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No questions, no accusations. It's just 2 people who knew what it meant to be disbelieved on sight. Finally, Claire spoke. They say you made a woman walk. Aria's voice was barely audible. I didn't make her do anything. She wanted to be seen. Claire studied her closely. So do you. Aria reached into her pocket and opened her palm. The stone rested there, dark and glinting. I don't cry because they don't believe, she said, tears welling. I cry because they never do. No matter what. Claire didn't look away. She didn't laugh. She simply leaned forward. Maybe it's time someone did. Detective Claire sat alone in her office, files spread across her desk like broken truths. Faint rain tapped at the window behind her. She'd been poring over Aria's case for hours. It wasn't just a hunch anymore. Something in her gut said this girl was more than what the reports called her. Emotionally disturbed, unstable, delusional. She opened a scanned document, a medical complaint filed by Chantel James, Aria's mother. It was dated 6 months before her death. Severe abdominal pain, refused pain meds, sent home with Tylenol. Another one, 3 weeks later, visit ignored, accused of exaggeration, and then patient deceased, cause internal hemorrhage. Claire's throat tightened. The hospital had dismissed the complaints, never investigated further. Aria had watched her mother die painfully. Slowly, while the world labeled them both liars, in the visiting room, Aria sat across from Claire once more. Her eyes looked older now, as if each day added a year. "You said the stone belonged to your grandma?" Claire asked gently. Aria nodded. "Grandma Ola, she was a baby catcher, a midwife. Didn't believe hospitals were safe for folks like us. Said they took more than they healed." Claire tilted her head. "And the stone?" She called it shining warm. Said it came from the dirt under her mama's house in Louisiana. When she held it, she said she could feel all the women who came before her like they were holding her back." Claire leaned in. "So, it's magic?" Aria shook her head. "No, it's memory." She went quiet, then added she used to wrap it in cloth and place it in the hands of women giving birth. Said it helped them remember their strength. Helped them survive. Soft flashback took shape in Claire's mind, though she'd never seen it. A small, candlelit room. Women humming. A girl kneeling beside her grandmother. Steam rising from a pot of herbs. Stone glinting faintly. As brown hands passed it from one generation to the next, "It's not the stone they fear," Aria said suddenly. "It's that I believed in it, that I believed in me." Claire felt the weight of those words settle on her chest. This wasn't a scam. This was survival wrapped in silence, passed through hands, misnamed as magic because the truth of it was too inconvenient. She stood and gently placed her hand on Aria's shoulder. "You're not crazy," she said. "You're a witness." And with that, Claire knew her role had changed. Claire's heels echoed sharply through the courthouse hallway. The morning air was thick with tension, the kind that clung to skin and sank into bone. She clutched a folder. Of records hospital complaints, foster care reports, the long paper trail of a girl silenced too many times. Every page a scream ignored. Inside the courtroom, Aria sat at the defense table, eyes low but spine straight. She wore a simple navy dress Claire had bought her the day before. Her hands stayed in her lap, fingers brushing the stone through the fabric of her pocket. The trial was supposed to be about child endangerment and misleading vulnerable adults. But everyone in the room knew what it was really about. Control, image, making sure, A, black girl didn't make white men uncomfortable was something they couldn't explain. Claire had already faced backlash for getting involved. The precincts. Captain warned her off the record to be careful where you place your faith. But she had seen too much now to stay neutral. Silence, she realized, had a cost. And so did truth. Then came the news that shattered the last illusion of safety. 2 nights ago, Aria's group home had been vandalized. Slurs were spray-painted across the front. Her belongings burned in the backyard. A note taped to the mailbox. Read, "Which girls don't belong here." Aria hadn't cried. She'd simply sat on her bunk, staring into nothing. When questioned, the staff accused her of bringing trouble, said the publicity made her a liability. Now, in court, those same adults claimed she had manipulated the media and fed a delusion for attention. The defense called her unwell. They asked if she'd ever hallucinated, if she thought the stone spoke to her. Claire was called next. She stood tall in the witness box. "She's not delusional," she said. "She's been ignored." There's a difference. When asked why she believed Aria, Claire didn't mention the stone. She spoke of the medical records, the dismissal of pain, the girls labeled unstable because they dared to grieve out loud. "She doesn't need fixing," Claire said, her voice steady. "She needs to be heard." Finally, it was Aria's turn. She stepped onto the stand, trembling but proud. Her voice cracked at first, but she pressed on. "I didn't ask to be special. I asked to be seen. When my mama was dying, they didn't listen. When I cried, they called me violent. Now I show up with a stone and suddenly everyone's watching. But they still don't hear me." She looked around the room, her eyes landing on Mr. Langford, seated stiffly in the gallery. "I don't care if they think it's magic," she said. "What hurt wasn't that they laughed. It's that they always do." The room fell silent. No one moved. And in that silence, Claire saw what resistance truly looked like. The courtroom was holding its breath. The judge, a gray-haired man with a tight jaw, glanced down at his notes. The murmurs had stilled. Claire sat tense, her nails pressed into her palm. Aria stared at the floor, the stone heavy in her pocket. Her shoulders braced for the weight of yet another loss. Then the doors creaked open. At first no one turned. Just the slow, steady sound of shoes clicking against the polished tile floor. Then gasps began soft, disbelieving. Mr. Langford stood abruptly. "Mama?" She walked, no wheelchair, no cane, just trembling legs and tear-streaked cheeks. The courtroom parted around her like water. Her every step seemed to echo louder than any voice. "I need to speak," she said, voice breaking but firm. The judge gestured, too stunned to object. She stood in the center of the room and turned to the bench. "That girl said in that diner, it wasn't a trick." People shifted in their seats. Phones clicked quietly. Someone began to cry. I felt something in that moment. A warmth. It ran through my feet like lightning. I didn't believe it myself. At first, thought it would fade. Thought if I said it out loud, folks would call me crazy. Or worse, say I was trying to help a lie. She turned to Aria then. "But I can walk now." And it started with her. Mr. Langford's mouth opened, then shut. He didn't speak. Couldn't the judge look stunned? "Mrs. Langford, are you saying your mobility returned that day?" "Yes, sir." "I'm not asking you to call it a miracle. Just don't call her a liar." A murmur swept through the room like wind through dry leaves. The charges were dropped. Claire exhaled sharply, tears stinging behind her eyes. Ria sat frozen for a moment, then gripped the edge of the table as if afraid she might float away. She wasn't smiling, not yet, just breathing deep, full, steady. Outside the courthouse, the story exploded. Walking witness. Town woman says girl's claim was true, read the headline that night. Social media called it divine. Others claimed Mrs. Langford was confused, pressured, dramatic. A local pastor called it a spiritual hoax. A YouTuber declared it proof of mass hysteria. But in the middle of the noise, something shifted. At school, teachers stopped calling Aria sweetheart with that condescending tone. At the group home, no one told her to keep her weird stuff to herself. People looked at her nowned. Some didn't look away. Not everyone believed, but they saw her. That was new, as the sun set on the courthouse steps. Claire placed a hand on Aria's back. "You did that?" she whispered. Aria looked up at the sky, fingers brushing the smooth edges of the stone. "I didn't do it alone," she said. The days grew warmer, and so did Aria. It had been 3 months since the courtroom doors opened to truth, and everything changed. The one with creaky floors and sunflowers painted on the mailbox. It belonged to Claire, who, after everything, didn't ask permission to foster Aria. She simply made space. Every morning, Aria rose early, packed her own lunch, and walked to her new school. She no longer sat in the back of the classroom. Teachers called her name without hesitation. And some of the other students' kids who once avoided her now slipped notes into her locker, asking if the stone was real. She never gave them a straight answer. "It's not about the stone," she would say with a smile. "It's about the holding." Every Wednesday evening, Claire helped organize a healing circle in the rec center basement. It started small, just Claire, Aria, and 2 other girls from the group home. But it grew fast. They brought candles, shared stories, cried, laughed, and passed their own objects, ribbons, old photographs. They called it Remembering Fire. Aria sat in the middle, not as a leader, but as a mirror. Kids began coming. With their grandmothers, some with old cloths wrapped around pebbles from their yards. A boy with a stutter placed a chipped marble in Aria's hand and said, "It helps me feel brave." And that, she believed, was enough. The town changed, too quietly, subtly. The diner got a new name. Marigold's. New owners. A mural on the outside wall showed a girl holding a stone, surrounded by women of all shades rising behind her. Some. People still rolled their eyes when they passed, but fewer than before. And Mr. Langford, he was gone. Moved upstate, they said. Sold the family hardware store. His mother stayed, though. She came to the circle once, clutching Aria's hand like it was the last light in a dark room. One Saturday, Claire drove Aria to a graveyard on the edge of town. The wind was soft that day. Aria knelt at the headstone marked Chantel, James, and laid the stone gently in the grass. "Mama," she whispered, "I kept it warm for you." She sat in silence, sunlight pouring over her shoulders. "I'm not shining for them," she said. "I shine because I remember you. I shine because I'm still here." Claire stood behind her, quiet, holding space the way only someone who understands ever could. And in that moment, Araya's story didn't end. It began not as a miracle, not as proof, but as a living breath passed between generations, and it glowed.